What does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? This is a question that a lot of people tend to ask themselves, and a lot of people, I think, end up getting wrong. Um, in Matthew chapter 22, when Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees ask him a question. They say, which is the greatest commandment out of all the commandments of the law? And he says to them, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. Now we know that as lovers of God, in order to keep the law, we are to love God with all our hearts, all our souls, all our minds. Because in doing that, we will indeed keep the law. The reality of it is we can't do it. We not even for 1 second have been able, not even for one fraction of a second, have been able to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's just the reality of the fallen nature of humanity, and we won't be able to do this until we are finally glorified in the presence of God, where there is no sin, where there is nothing hindering us from being able to do this. So that's why Christ had to die, so that in dying on the cross, he would impute his righteousness onto us, and therefore he would be the fulfillment of that for us. Now, but the next statement that he says here in Matthew chapter 22, this is in verse 39, if you want to read along. He says, the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, what is this in context of? Well, the original, the first time that this actual phrase, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, comes up is in the Old Testament law. It's in Leviticus chapter 19. And it's in the context of not oppressing your neighbor, not bearing false witness against your neighbor, not hating your neighbor, but leaving the harvest, that which is on the floor and that which is left over from the harvest, leave it for the poor. You shall not hate your neighbor. You shall not hate your brother. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people. It's in the context of saying, loving your neighbor as yourself is made manifest in how you care for the poor, how you deal with your brother or with humanity or with those around you. It's in the context of whether or not you're oppressing your neighbor or robbing your neighbor. So loving your neighbor as yourself is actually made manifest in how you treat individuals on a fair basis. If anything, showing mercy and showing compassion and loving kindness to your neighbor. And your neighbor is not just limited to the people that are living on your same street. Christ wants to say that loving your neighbor as yourself is in regards to all of humanity. You are to love even your enemies, as it says in Matthew chapter 5. We are to love all people. We are to love every person who is made in the image of God. Now, this is what I hear a lot of the times. And this is where I say no, no, no. And that is, people tend to say that you need to love yourself before you can love your neighbor. That's not what this verse is trying to say. Don't even go there. Please don't even go there. You already know how to love yourself. That's the point. Nobody loves you more than you love yourself. We as fallen beings, we as people who are experiencing the fallenness of this world, we are by nature, we love ourselves. We take care of ourselves, we dress ourselves, we feed ourselves. Nobody needs to tell us or remind us to do these things. We just do these things because we love ourselves. And if we didn't love ourselves, we wouldn't do these things for ourselves. And we would allow ourselves to just rot away, to just die. But we don't do that because we love ourselves. If anything, we overly love ourselves. We overindulge in our love for ourselves. We love ourselves so much that we are willing a lot of the times to even neglect other people's needs, other people's necessities, even sometimes our family's needs and necessities, because we want to make ourselves happy. Well, here's the thing. You don't need to learn to love yourself. You already do love yourself. If you dress yourself, if you bathe yourself, if you feed yourself, if you quench your thirst, if you satisfy yourself with all of your desires and all your wants and your career and all these things and you pursue these things, I'm not saying that these are bad things. I'm just saying that you already love yourself. And because you already know how to love yourself, in that same way, when you see your neighbor who is poor, who is oppressed, who is being marginalized, who is being hated by the world, who is being neglected, who does not have enough for himself, for his own needs, and you don't do anything to help that person, or you don't love your neighbor as you already love yourself, then you are failing to keep the commandments of God. That's what that verse means. Please, please, please don't get it wrong. Don't mistake Jesus' words as saying, oh, first you need to love yourself before you can love your neighbor. No, that's not what he's saying whatsoever. Trust me, when I say this, I mean this in the greatest humility, knowing that I am just as guilty as you are. We love ourselves. So in that same way that you love yourself, go love your neighbor as well. I pray this has been a blessing to you. May the Lord richly bless you and keep you always.